when you stand in the middle of a massive city and you just look up at a 100-story skyscraper, your eyes are immediately drawn to the visible triumphs.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you see the glass reflecting the clouds, the sleek architectural lines, the penthouse suites catching the sunset. It is completely magnificent. But standing on that sidewalk, you almost never stop to think about the thousands of tons of concrete and, steel rebar buried hundreds of feet in the mud below.
Right, because it's entirely invisible. And yet, if you remove that subterranean foundation, that beautiful glass tower just instantly collapses into a pile of rubble.
It's gone.
Exactly. We are mesmerized by what we can see, and we're completely oblivious to what actually sustains it.
And welcome to the deep dive. Because today, we're taking that exact same lens and applying it to human achievement. So our mission today is to explore a really fascinating theological framework based on the biblical text of Hosea.
Yeah, specifically chapters 7 through 15.
Right. We're looking at how this ancient text directly confronts our modern cultural obsession with the whole self-made individual. The source material we're digging into diagnoses this deeply rooted psychological and spiritual blind spot. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because on the surface, when I see someone working 80-hour weeks and they finally hit $1 million in revenue or they achieve this massive personal milestone, it feels incredibly dismissive to say they didn't build that themselves.
Yeah, I get that. But
Yeah.
then you look at this concept of invisible architecture,
Right.
which completely reframes how we define success. This hyper-focus on human effort, the grit, the late nights, the brilliant strategies you just mentioned, it creates a profound blind spot.
Like we're only looking at the glass in the penthouse.
Exactly. It forces us to ignore the foundational support that makes that success possible in the first place. I mean, we forget the hidden preparation. We overlook the timely opportunities.
Like just happening to meet the exact right mentor at the exact right moment.
Yes. Or we ignore the genetic lottery of our health or our intellect and all the people who quietly supported us behind the scenes. And for the Christian, the source argues this isn't just a lapse in social perception or like bad manner.
Right, it's bigger than that.
Much bigger. It is a highly dangerous spiritual malady.
So I want you, the listener, to think about a recent personal win in your own life.
Yeah.
Seriously. Lock in on a moment you were genuinely proud of. Maybe it was a major promotion at work or a successful project you finally launched, or even just hitting a personal health goal you've been grinding toward for months.
We all have those moments.
Yeah, we do. So hold on to that because we're going to come back to it. But ask yourself right now, how quickly did you internalize 100% of the credit for that win? How fast did the moving parts, the timing, and all the aligned circumstances just fade into the background?
It is the most natural human instinct to do exactly that. We desperately want to be the sole author of our own success story. We really crave the pen.
We really do. And I tend to think of this hustle culture, this fierce obsession with being entirely self-made, as a uniquely modern phenomenon. Like, I usually assume it was born on social media or in Silicon Valley startup garages with tech bros drinking energy drinks.
Right.
But looking at the history, this specific human flaw was diagnosed thousands of years ago in the book of Hosea.
Which just proves that human psychology hasn't evolved a fraction of an inch. I mean, the technology changes, sure, the vocabulary updates, but the core vulnerability of the human heart remains exactly the same.
Yeah, there's this pivotal quote we need to look at from Hosea 7.15, where God is speaking about the ancient nation of Israel. It says, "I trained them and strengthened their arms, yet they plot evil against me."
It's a striking verse.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, just reading that, it is heavy. But what I don't fully grasp is the dynamic here. Like, how do you go from needing that level of support to actively working against it? What is the actual context of strengthening their arms?
Well, what's fascinating here is the Hebrew imagery underneath that translation. When a modern reader hears the phrase, strengthen their arms, it can sound incredibly distant.
Like a monarch sending funds to build a military or something?
Exactly, or a CEO signing a check for a corporate training program. But the imagery in the original language is fiercely intimate. It evokes the picture of a loving father teaching a toddler how to walk.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, getting down on his knees, holding their little hands, steadying them when they inevitably wobble and fall.
So it's not a transactional relationship at all.
Not even slightly. Alternatively, the source points out it's the image of a master warrior painstakingly training a young apprentice how to hold a heavy bow, correcting their posture day after day, teaching them to breathe, to strike with precision.
So God was heavily involved.
Very heavily. God was not a distant observer or some passive benefactor in ancient Israel's history. He was acting as their personal trainer, their chief strategist, and their fierce protector right in the trenches.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if we take that master warrior and apprentice imagery, it's like a world champion boxer. Imagine this young kid who spends his entire life being mentored by an old, wise coach. The coach teaches him every block, every jab,
Built to stamina.
right? Protects him from predatory managers, and finally gets him to the heavyweight title fight. And the very moment the boxer gets the championship belt wrapped around his waist, he uses the exact techniques his lifelong coach taught him to turn around and punch his coach in the face. It defies basic logic.
Yes. And to take your boxer analogy a crucial step further, the boxer doesn't just punch the coach. He goes to the post-fight press conference, sits in front of the microphones, and tells the entire world that he taught himself how to fight.
Huh.
He claims he is entirely self-made. That is the betrayal being described here. And the framework we are exploring analyzes this by introducing the concept of spiritual amnesia.
A spiritual amnesia, how exactly does that set in? Is it an overnight thing?
No, it's a slow psychological drift. What happened was, once ancient Israel actually became secure, once the existential threats faded and they became prosperous and militarily capable, they looked down at their own muscles and assumed they had built that strength in a vacuum.
So the amnesia just sort of settled over them.
Precisely. They took the very strength that God had meticulously provided and used it to court foreign alliances, to worship pagan idols, and to plot evil. They essentially treated the Almighty as a ladder they had climbed and could now just kick away.
They looked at the beautiful glass skyscraper and decided the subterranean foundation was completely irrelevant.
Exactly. But this raises an important question, right? How could a nation forget so quickly? Because Israel's rebellion was uniquely tragic. Their entire national identity directly contradicted the idea of self-sufficiency.
Because they had the historical receipts to prove they weren't self-made.
Right. They had the Red Sea, they had manna falling from the sky. It wasn't subtle.
Yeah, the narrative of their entire existence was built on divine rescue, not human achievement.
Yeah.
And what strikes me is that their greatest, most revered leaders, the ones who actually had the resumes to back up some serious swagger, they modeled the exact opposite behavior of what Hosea is condemning.
They absolutely did.
Let's talk about Moses, Joshua, and David, because they serve as this massive counter-narrative. I want to start with Moses, because the irony is glaring. Moses is tasked with leading millions of people out of Egyptian slavery. From an organizational standpoint, it's arguably one of the most complex leadership tasks in human history.
A logistical nightmare, really.
Totally. Yet, he is described in the text as the meekest man on earth. Why? Because he didn't rely on explosive charisma or some innate military genius or like a killer public speaking style.
He couldn't. He was keenly aware of his own profound limitations. I mean, think about it. He had tried to be the self-made savior of Israel 40 years earlier in Egypt, relying entirely on his own strength, and it ended in disaster and exile.
He literally had to flee for his life.
Exactly. So by the time he actually led them out, his psychology had been fundamentally broken down and rebuilt. He knew deeply that he was utterly inadequate without divine intervention.
And you see that same deliberate rejection of human tactics in Joshua. But I have to admit, the story of Joshua facing the fortified city of Jericho always felt a bit strategically absurd to me.
Oh, it definitely sounds absurd on paper.
Right. From a purely human standpoint,
Yeah.
you would expect him to draw up a complex battle plan. You expect siege ramps, infantry formations, supply lines, but he doesn't do any of that.
And that strategic absurdity is exactly the point. When confronted with the commander of the Lord's army, Joshua fell on his face. He completely relinquished his human authority. God didn't give him a conventional battle plan because a conventional battle plan would have allowed Israel to take the credit.
They would have said, look at how brilliant our siege tactics were.
Exactly. Walking around a wall blowing trumpets completely severs the possibility of human boasting. Joshua recognized that if there was going to be a victory, it had to be a supernatural gift, not a tactical, self-made achievement.
And then there's David. The guy is renowned as Israel's greatest warrior king. He defeated Goliath. He expanded the empire. I mean, if anyone had earned the right to trust his own instincts and coast on his past victories, it was David.
He had the ultimate resume.
He did. But the texts point out that David never walked onto a battlefield assuming his resume guaranteed his future success. He wrote in Psalm 144 that it was God who trained his hands for war. He knew exactly who the coach in his corner was. But what was his actual mechanism for keeping that amnesia at bay?
It was the daily habit of surrender. Before every single campaign, David inquired of the Lord. He didn't treat God as a consultant to just, rubber stamp his brilliant ideas.
Right, like God was just an advisor.
Exactly. He treated him as the absolute commander. That act of inquiring was a psychological reset button. It actively blocked the amnesia by forcing David to verbally and physically acknowledge his dependence before he ever drew a sword. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains the true purpose of the wilderness years for Israel.
How so? Because the wilderness just seems like a punishment, like they messed up and got put in a timeout for 40 years.
It wasn't just random, meaningless hardship. The framework describes the wilderness as a curated training ground. It was meticulously designed to build their resilience, yes, but not so they could eventually boast in their own survival skills.
So it wasn't a boot camp to make them self-sufficient.
Not at all. The training ground existed so that their weakness would be so apparent, the divine strength holding them up would be undeniable to the surrounding nations. The weakness wasn't a glitch in the system, it was the exact mechanism for displaying the glory of God.
So what does this all mean for us today? Because this is where I really want to suspend the bulk of our time in this deep dive. I am not an ancient king.
No, you are not.
I am not leading an army against literal stone walls, and neither are you listening right now. We are trying to figure out how to run a marketing department or manage a chaotic household of toddlers or launch a small business in a really brutal economy. How does this history of ancient Israel map onto the modern corporate office or the modern living room?
It maps on perfectly because human nature hasn't evolved past this vulnerability. We've just updated our vocabulary and changed the clothes our idols wear. There's this brilliant observation in the analysis we're exploring. It says, the human heart remains a factory of idols.
A factory of idols. That is a haunting phrase.
It really is. And when you place that relentless factory of idols into our modern culture, a culture that fiercely worships the self-made individual, that celebrates the ultimate grind, that elevates the solopreneur who supposedly built an empire from nothing, it is tragically easy to fall into the exact same trap as ancient Israel.
Because we're constantly told that we are the masters of our own destiny.
Exactly. We don't bow down to statues of rain gods anymore. We bow down to our CRM systems, our investment portfolios, and our own raw competence.
I want to tie this directly back to that personal win I asked you, the listener, to think about earlier. That promotion or that health goal. Think about how you got there. We look at the finish line and we praise our own discipline. But this ancient warning connects directly to a New Testament principle, specifically James 1:17.
Yes, which states that every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights.
This is a total paradigm shift for the modern mind.
It completely dismantles the illusion of the self-made man or woman.
Right.
We have to realize that our raw intellect, like the sheer processing speed of our brains, is an endowment.
Right.
Our physical health and the energy levels required to work those long hours, an endowment, our unique, innate talents, and even the passing opportunities we get, like being born in a certain era in a certain country or having access to specific education, these are all divine gifts. They are not our own creations. I mean, you didn't knit your own DNA.
I hear that, but when you're in the trenches, grinding out a business plan at 2 a.m., it really feels like you're the one doing the heavy lifting. How do we reconcile that personal effort with this idea of invisible architecture? Are we supposed to just pretend our hard work doesn't matter?
Not at all. The effort is entirely real, and it is required. But who gave you the cognitive capacity to stay up until 2 a.m. and actually comprehend that business plan?
That's a fair point.
Who gave you the healthy lungs to breathe through the stress of that launch? The framework isn't saying you didn't work hard. It's saying the raw materials you used to do that hard work were loaned to you. Even seasons of hardship, the failed business ventures, the painful rejections, that is active training.
So even the failures are part of the architecture.
Yes, it's a modern, curated training ground, refining our character and strengthening our spiritual muscles for broader kingdom purposes.
Wait, this is the part that I actually struggle with. We always hear that hitting rock bottom or going through a massive crisis is the ultimate test of faith. But the framework argues something completely counterintuitive. It argues that prosperity is actually a much harsher test of faith than adversity. Why is success so much more spiritually dangerous than failure?
Let's look at the underlying psychology of lack versus abundance. In times of lack, desperation naturally drives people to cry out for help. When your bank account is empty or you get a terrifying medical diagnosis or a key relationship shatters, the illusion of your own control is instantly destroyed.
Yeah, you are forced to realize you are not self-sufficient. You
Exactly.
feel the floor drop out, so you reach for a lifeline. It's automatic.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much faith to ask for help when you're literally drowning.
Exactly. But in abundance.
Huh.
That is where the lethal danger lies. When the startup succeeds and you hit 1 million in revenue, when the massive promotion arrives and you finally have the corner office, or frankly, when a ministry suddenly flourishes and thousands of people are paying attention to you.
That's when the amnesia kicks in.
Yes, that is when the spiritual amnesia quietly, almost imperceptibly creeps in. We subconsciously look at our comfortable bank accounts, our framed degrees on the wall, and our glowing performance reviews, and we echo the exact arrogance of ancient empires. We declare in our hearts, look what my incredible hands have built.
Because we aren't literally worshiping golden calves anymore, the shift is terrifyingly subtle. We don't realize we've shifted our worship to our own competence. Walk me through the step-by-step of how a modern person actually develops this amnesia. Like, what does it look like on a random Tuesday?
It looks remarkably mundane. Let's say you're a startup founder or a corporate manager. You hit your quarterly numbers and suddenly the pressure is off. You start relying entirely on the world's systems to maintain that success.
So you stop reaching out for the lifeline.
Right. Instead of waking up and spending time in prayer, acknowledging your dependence like David did, you sleep in a bit and immediately check your email or your metrics dashboard. You obsess over secular business strategies. You trust in your networking abilities and social media algorithms to sustain you.
Wow. It just slowly takes over.
It does. You slowly neglect the spiritual disciplines that actually connect you to the true source of your strength. You disconnect from the vine, believing you are now the root system.
And we become the boxer punching the coach. We take the very influence, the wealth, the platform, and the relational strengths that was painstakingly cultivated within us by a higher power, and we use it to serve our own selfish interests.
You build our own little kingdoms.
Exactly, our own personal brands,
Right.
completely ignoring the fact that we were given those endowments to advance a much larger kingdom.
It is the exact same rebellion diagnosed in Hosea 7.15. I trained them and strengthened their arms, yet they plot evil against me. It doesn't have to look like a military alliance with Egypt. Today, plotting evil against the one who trained you might just look like ruthlessly climbing a corporate ladder, ignoring your family, and stepping on your employees, all while using the brilliant mind God gave you to do it.
That is incredibly sobering. It really brings the whole message into a sharp, uncomfortable focus. This entire deep dive, this exploration of Hosea and invisible architecture, is ultimately a mirror held up to the soul. And what it demands from us is radical humility.
It really does.
It urges you, the listener, to look at your life right now, to view your strengths, your victories, your intellect, and your talents, not as your own personal property that you earned, but as borrowed assets.
Borrowed assets. Just internalizing that one phrase completely changes the weight and the purpose of our success.
It changes everything. And it anchors us right back to the final reminder we pulled from the text, the words of Jesus in John 15.5. Apart from me, you can do nothing. It leaves us with a piercing question. Are you using the strength you were given to walk away from the very one who trained your arms?
And I'd leave you with this final thought to mull over as you go about your day. If all of your greatest talents, your sharp intellect, and your absolute proudest successes are truly just borrowed assets, capital given to you by a lender for a purpose far beyond your own comfort and glory, what happens when the lender decides to call in the loan?
Oh.
How would treating your biggest personal achievement today as a temporary lease completely change the way you use it tomorrow?
Think about that skyscraper again. The glass reflects the sky beautifully. The penthouse looks down on the world with absolute pride. But the very moment that building decides it no longer needs the invisible rebar buried in the dirt, the whole thing comes crashing down.